Well, everyone, I like to think that we can come here and provide you with a little bit more entertainment than that race, but it sadly hasn't given us a lot to talk about. We are going to try our best to dissect what went on this weekend. There was obviously quite a lot um, that went down yesterday. By yesterday, I mean qualifying. We're obviously just straight off the back of uh, maybe, I don't know, one of the most boring races of all time. But the qualifying session was incredibly spicy and it got exciting, and there was a few curveballs thrown in there. Obviously, another disappointing weekend for Lewis Hamilton, but we will get into that. We are Box Box Podcast, powered by Box Box Club, and we are offering you a free. It's not free. What are we offering them? 30% discount off an Ultra subscription when you use code BoxBoxPod. Do make sure you check us out on all social media. Just search BoxBox. We will come up on both Instagram and TikTok. That is where we are primarily hanging out. We do post more content there than you get just on the podcast. There is additional clips, and we do tend to post twice a day. So do get involved. That is where the action is going down. But we are going to take you through the inner outer workings of this weekend in the most entertaining way possible.
All right, guys, welcome along. And yeah, not the most exciting race. And obviously, we're heading into summer break now. So I think it's probably the perfect time. Good little battle between Oscar and Lando. And we'll get into that and we'll dissect all of that. But I just want to touch on something quickly, Luke, before we get into the podcast. I know we'll touch on like qualifying and stuff with Lewis Hamilton, but I've seen a lot of speculation about Lewis Hamilton and his future. Obviously, there was some cryptic Instagram post which a lot of people were expecting just about, maybe a brand or something that he's doing. But after yesterday with his qualifying and coming out after saying, Ferrari need a better driver, there was a lot of speculation on social media after that. Actually, is Lewis Hamilton going to be leaving Ferrari come the end of the season? And I mean, look, it was a very difficult day for him yesterday. Not the most easiest day for him today in the race. But is this the end of Lewis Hamilton?
No, I don't think. There's been so much speculation around Lewis's season or time at Ferrari this season. I don't think he'll be leaving at the end of the season. Look, he's had qualifying issues since what? Since not last year, but the year before, yeah. I don't think this is his worst weekend. I think it was just made worse by the fact that Charles took that car to P1, and that car should have been. I will never make an excuse for the McLarens. Those McLarens should be P1 and P2 every weekend. What Charles Leclerc did this weekend was unbelievable. And then to even go on and look like he was going to win the race for a big portion of it, even more unbelievable. But Lewis should have been in the mixer. He should have been in at least P4. If Charles was going to put in that banging lap, that's where he should have been. And yeah, it was disappointing. Obviously, Lewis came out afterwards talking pretty critically of himself, saying, "I'm useless." Pretty sure he said something along the lines of, "I'm just shit" or something. And that Ferrari should look for a new driver. I don't think that is going to happen. I don't think Ferrari will look for a new driver. I don't believe they'll need to look for a new driver. But he needs something to start clicking, because it's not the most ideal way to end your career. If this is the way that it goes for Lewis Hamilton, which I don't think it will, I think we are likely to see him. I still think we're going to see Lewis get more race wins. I think we're going to see Lewis win races at Ferrari. Not this season, but I think there's a view to a bigger picture here. And I believe he's part of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've always thought Lewis Hamilton is going to be there for the next few years. But it's just recently he's very critical of himself, not for the first time. But obviously he just comments about him, Ferrari needing another driver, and it just got me thinking, and obviously seeing a load of people on social media going, actually, is this the end of Lewis Hamilton? But I want to hear from you guys at home. What do you think? Obviously, can Lewis turn this around? I think he'll be very, very relieved to get this season out of the way and this, ground effect era out of the way, heading into
What are your
2026.
what are your thoughts on his race engineer?
Um, I have a lot of issues with Ferrari engineers in general, and I think that showed once again this weekend. And you saw the frustration from, Charles Leclerc. Why have you put me in this situation? That car in, the first stint, even the second stint, looked actually pretty decent. To then actually end up finishing P4 after starting on pole position is a real disappointing day for Ferrari. And you start to hear this more and more from the likes of Charles with their frustration with the engineers. Why don't you listen to me? Why aren't you listening? We spoke about this. Why aren't you listening to what I'm saying? And you've heard Lewis Hamilton be critical as well, going, listen to me. Let me listen to my ideas. I think there's some real issues within that Ferrari team. And obviously Fred Vasseur signed a new contract. Congratulations to him. But generally, this team have got two very solid drivers, but they are not listening to what they need.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I saw another thing on the radio today of Lewis asking a question and it just not getting answered. And he had to come over again and say, like, yeah, talk to me, like, tell me. And there's clearly, look, I'm not going to claim to know Riccardo Adami well enough to know his credentials in the sport or how talented he is. I'm sure he's a super talented guy to get to the position that he is within a team like Ferrari. But what I will say is there is clearly zero chemistry between him and Lewis, and ultimately what you're not going to change is the driver that you've just spent millions and millions and millions of pounds on to get in, who's commercially been so successful for your brand already. Think of when Lewis signed for Mercedes, for McLaren, for Ferrari, Jesus Christ, what happened to their stock instantly. So I think they need to make a change because it's not working. And look, it goes deeper than just beyond Lewis's connection with the engineer. There has been, for so long now, issues at Ferrari that they just don't seem to iron out. And look, they pulled off an absolute blinder yesterday. It wasn't all Charles Leclerc. They had to give him a car that was at least capable of having that extracted from it. And Charles absolutely perfected that lap. It was incredible. But once again, you get to the end of the weekend. Who are the laughing stocks? Ferrari. And don't get me wrong, you probably think I'm like, all of them. Lewis, Charles, they're all thrown into this mix. Lewis, there's not really anyone to blame but Lewis for Lewis's performance this weekend.
100%.
That is on Lewis. For whatever reason, he's not getting along with the car. Whether that's because the car is just not suited to him, whether it's because he's getting older, it's irrelevant at this point in time. Charles Leclerc gets a podium, gets pole position in qualifying, and then ends up finishing P4 despite leading a lot of the race, or at least being net P1 for the majority of the race. And yeah, obviously a dispute with the engineers over the radio, and once again, Ferrari leave, ironically red-faced.
Yeah, not the first time, is it? But anyway, do let us know what your thoughts are on Ferrari engineers and the team in general. Where should we start off with? If you're new here, what we do, we dissect each team. We go across and review their weekend. Should we start Williams?
Yeah, sure.
So Williams, Sainz qualified P13, Albon P20. And actually, when you look in the race, it wasn't the most, fantastic weekend for them. Carlos Sainz P14, Alex Albon P15. It was just a tough weekend for both of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those typical Williams weekends where we say, look, they're a yo-yo team. You're either going to see them best of the rest in terms of, they're not going to quite be in the mix with the Ferraris, McLarens, Mercedes, but they'll be the next best other than Red Bull. But Red Bull's a hard one because I mean, when I say Red Bull, I mean Max. And then some weekends they're just going to be absolutely nowhere. And that's exactly what we got this weekend. It was just a kind of a nowhere weekend for them, and it's fine. You know, it's not the end of the world for them. A pretty uneventful weekend. I'm sure they'll be disappointed at this stage to not be picking up at least a point every weekend, because they do. That's the one thing they're lacking, that consistency. That's what Williams need. You know, they've come so far from where they were last season, but you know, especially the season before that, and you go back a season or two before that. Now they just need to find their rhythm and make sure that they're not, okay, best of the rest one week, or like P15, 16 the next. Then maybe they're getting P10. Then it's been a rough weekend. You know, they just need that consistency.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's go to Alpine. Obviously, another tough weekend for Alpine, and fair play. Franco Colapinto outqualified Pierre Gasly. He got P14, Gasly P17, and actually Colapinto finished P18, Gasly P19 in the race. Tough weekend for both of them. They weren't really anywhere, were they, at all this weekend?
No, it was tough. I didn't actually see the incident, but obviously Pierre Gasly got a 10-second time penalty. Not that it made much difference to his race ultimately. Yeah, Alpine have got some. We know there's been a lot of instability at the team, but they've got some real issues, because let's not forget that at one point they were, you know, in a race with McLaren when McLaren were further back. Sort of like, you know, I guess best of the rest, and you look how far McLaren have come, and Alpine just seem to be going backwards. You know, it's been a shambles with their driver lineup. It's been an absolute shambles. Getting Jack Doohan, who was their reserve driver for God knows how long enough, he finally gets the seat, and what do? They go and overspend on a driver who hadn't really properly proved himself in F1, who they've now given the seat to, and it's just not working out. But ultimately, it's not just Colapinto that isn't working out. The team isn't working out. They're not being given the car. But we have seen, when you've got someone like Pierre Gasly, sometimes he pulls out an absolute blinder in that car. And I just think they're looking to next year now. But if they find themselves in the same position that they have done for the last God knows how long, where are they? They're not doing anything.
Then, you know, for someone having someone like Flavio there with so much success in the past, you do expect more, and it'd be interesting to see what happens next year. But I think this year we're going to exactly see what Alpine continue to do week in, week out. Then, you know, Gasly will pick up the points, Colapinto will struggle. It just seems to be that's the route they keep going at the moment. So yeah, for Alpine, another tough weekend. But yeah, Gasly is that only shining light, shall we say. I know he didn't pick up any points this weekend, but he's the one who's basically leading this team forward. Haas. So obviously Ollie Behrman qualified P11, Esteban Ocon qualified P18, but obviously Behrman got some damage. He ended up having to retire. Ocon finished P16. Look, we seem to say the same thing each week. This is basically Haas. They'll have some good weekends. They'll have some bad weekends. This one was a bad weekend. I don't think they'll be too disappointed with how their first half of the season has gone. I think this is a season where actually they will just continue to, you know, pick up those points here and there. And I think they'll be relatively happy with that heading into next year.
Yeah, because let's not forget, right? Haas are still, what are they, 8 points off being sixth in the constructors. You know, that's not something I think we would have expected from Haas if we sort of roll it back a couple of years. So they have come a long way. But again, I'd say they're a little bit similar to Williams. They just need to find that bit of consistency, because I think it's in there. You know, how many times has Ollie Behrman finished P11? You know, how many more points could be on the table? Because it only takes a few. I say how many more points, you know, that's the difference. 6 points here is the difference between P9 and P7. So they're vital points, and it's fine margins when you're a team like Haas. So they just need to keep kicking on. It was obviously an unfortunate weekend, especially for Ollie Behrman. It wasn't ideal. He had the damage, and it sounds like they adjusted his aero balance incorrectly when he came in for his pit stop. So I think naturally retiring the car was just the better idea. But I don't worry about Haas, which I think at one point I did. Not this season, but I used to worry about them as a team. I could never really see a way out for them or a way forward. But I look at them now and I do think you're actually in quite a promising position.
I think they're in a good place. I think they've got a bit more stability under IO, sorry. And I think, look, Behrman's had a very strong first half of the season. I think they'll take a lot of positives from Behrman this year. Ocon for his new team. I think he's come in and done a great job as well. I think they're on the right direction, and I think as long as they get a solid car for next year, I think they'll be okay. I think they're going in, they look stable.
Yeah, and what they have shown is that I think this is one of the first ever times, and this might have been a Gunter Steiner thing. We all love Gunter, right? But I'm not necessarily sure he had the best man management. I think you actually saw quite a bit of that from Drive to Survive, if I'm allowed to use that phrase. But I think this is one of the first times I've looked at Haas and I think actually you look like a really good team environment, between the drivers, and I don't know, it all just looks.
They look like a proper United F1 team compared to what we have seen in the past. And I know you could say they've had Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Gunter Steiner, there are a lot of experience there, but this team seems to be. Their engineers look like, better. Just generally, they look an all-round F1 team. And that's actually really nice to see, considering how much pain they've gone through over the years with the likes of Schumacher, Mazepin, So, I'm not worried about Haas.
Nah, I really, they're a team that I find quite endearing now. I actually look at them and I think, you know what, coming into next year, I really hope Haas come out strong. I hope they don't have to face the struggles that they have done again previously coming into this sort of new era of cars, because I really like what they're building there, and I just think they look like a proper unit.
No, I agree. RB. Another race weekend, another weekend where Liam Lawson has finished ahead of Isaac Hadjar. We have not said that much this year. When you look at qualifying, Liam Lawson out-qualified him, P9, Hadjar P10. In the race today, Hadjar P11, Lawson P8, picking up some good points for RB today. Lawson, and we said this last week, he is starting to grow with confidence. We're starting to see that old Liam Lawson back again. And for us, considering how brutal his demotion was from Red Bull back to RB, it is really nice to see. And we questioned whether actually he would make it to the summer break. He's persevered, he looks good, he's in a really good team environment, and actually we're starting to see the old Liam Lawson, and I'm delighted for him. I really am.
Yeah, I think we spoke about when Liam Lawson lost this year how brutally horrible that must have been, and then it got really even worse for him. He came back to the RBs and was being absolutely dunked on by young Isaac Hadjar, who had just come up from F2, and it kind of looked like his whole career was crumbling in front of him. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but he's turned it around, and I think it kind of got people rooting for him a little bit, and I'm glad that he's turned it around. I could not be happier for him, and I think we all thought Liam Lawson was a decent driver when he was at RB last year. No one thought, oh, Liam Lawson is a bad driver, but it's like Red Bull almost draws that out of people. Where if you're a good driver, it will really bring out the worst of you. When you go there, and it clearly knocked his confidence. He came back. He didn't look like the Liam Lawson that we had seen the season before, or the season before that when he filled in for a bit. Like he just didn't look the same. So I think now we're seeing him where actually he is a competitive driver. You don't get the Red Bull seat. Red Bull are not idiots. They didn't give him that seat on the basis that he might be all right. they knew he was good.
Mm.
And, you know, whatever reason, the cursed Red Bull seat obviously fucked him up. Went back to RB, and he's just slowly come back. And we've, like, accredited a lot of RB's successes to the way the team looks. Again, I know we just spoke about Haas having, like, a really good united team front, but I think RB arguably looked like one of the strongest, like, tightest knit teams on the grid. Especially the relationship between the drivers seems really good. And I think that's probably really, really helped him get back to where he needs to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. Talking about Red Bull, right, Yuki Tsunoda, right, qualified P16, ended up finishing, where did he finish? P17. Max Verstappen qualified P8, ended up finishing P9. A very, very tough weekend for Red Bull, especially after their sprint win in Spa. To come here this weekend, it was a weekend to forget for Red Bull. But again, another weekend where actually Max Verstappen was the one who was carrying that team, because Yuki Tsunoda was pretty much nowhere to be seen. And this is not the first time we've said this. And this is a driver who looks like he has no confidence. And for us being Yuki fans, again, it is very sad to see.
Yeah, it's weird because through the practice sessions, he looked a lot closer to Max than I think he ever has. And then it just all fell to pieces again. I don't really know what to say about Yuki Tsunoda at this point because, you know, I don't think he's a bad driver. I can't sit there and say, oh, well, you know, Red Bull aren't idiots. They gave Liam Lawson the seat because he's a good driver, and now we're seeing that again. Now he's got his confidence back at RB. The same will be for Yuki. He's not a bad driver. I don't know why it's going so wrong. It's so difficult to determine when you've got one of the all-time greats in Max Verstappen driving your car. We don't know what the true performance of that car is. Is Yuki Tsunoda driving it like a very good F1 driver, but Max Verstappen is driving it like a great F1 driver? Or is Yuki driving it like a bad F1 driver and he should really be somewhere in between the two? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I don't know where the medium is. Like, where should Yuki Tsunoda be? Because no one's expecting him to be on par with Max Verstappen.
I think
that doesn't happen.
I think you're expecting him to pick up points week in, week out, which he just isn't doing. Just quickly on Max, obviously, as we know, he said this weekend he's going to be staying for Red Bull for next year. Yes. Obviously, George Russell will probably sigh a bit of relief, and Kimi Antonelli as well. But what is your thoughts on that? Obviously, this Red Bull team isn't as great as it's been over the last few years. New team principal. Is that the right move for Max Verstappen?
I think number one, I should preface, he doesn't owe them anything. I'm not someone that believes, well, you know, they gave him some really good times, he should stick by them when it's getting tough. It's not how it works. Like, it's just not how sport works. Like, he's got every right to be like, I'm a four-time world champion. I'm the best driver on the grid. I need a car that is at least going to get me race wins so I can compete for the world championship. He deserves that. And if I was him, you know, I would have been sniffing around other teams based on what's happened to Red Bull over the last season and a half. But I kind of get it. We don't know what is around the corner. Max has the luxury, right, of that he can give 2026 a go. And then he can be like, well, they're really good. Let's say it's, for whatever reason, Mercedes. Next year, Mercedes are the dominating team. I'm sorry, if Max puts out the feelers that he'd sign for Mercedes, they'd sign him.
100%.
So he's got that luxury where he can wait, because it's not like, oh, well, I should jump ship before it becomes... He'll be the hottest property on the grid. No one says no to Max Verstappen. No one says no to him. I don't care what Zach Brown says about he's happy with his two drivers. You should be happy with your two drivers. You'd be happier if Max Verstappen was one of them, though. It's as simple as that. I don't like saying that. Well, you know, I'm a Lewis fan, but Max is undeniably the best driver on the grid.
Yeah, no, 100%. So yeah, obviously for Red Bull fans, you're probably very happy for 2026 knowing Max will be staying. Right, where should we go? Let's go to Kick Sauber.
Wait, well,
Hulkenberg.
we should talk about Max and Lewis's incident on
Oh
track.
yeah, of course. Sorry, there's so many things which I was bored throughout that race that I kind of forgot.
Well, can I just say, on Max Verstappen looked like the only person who could overtake
Yeah,
this
some
weekend.
great overtakes by the way.
He was, some of them were classic Max.
Yeah.
I think like not over the line, but like on the line, where it was like, oh, if another driver didn't respond to that, that could have been a crash, but not beyond the limit. Apart from the Lewis one, which I felt that was a little bit naughty. I don't think that move was on. If Lewis had gone to make the corner like normal, there would have just been a huge crash. But I just, again, it was something I was watching with Max, and I was like, this is super impressive. You're the only guy who can overtake on track, basically. He was overtaking in Sector 2, and it was like no one else was overtaken, obviously, until you got to the end of the pit straight into Turn 1. But that Lewis one, I don't know, give me your thoughts.
Look, Max was the faster driver. I think it was a very ambitious lunge from him to try and get through that gap. Part of me just thinks that Lewis kind of knew, actually, look, I'm going nowhere here. Do I just move out of the way to avoid contact? But it reminds me of the old 2021 season where Max would go for moves like that. And I think Lewis had nothing to really fight for. Max was always going to get past him. Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't up at, what's the rule that your front axle is up against the mirror of the other car or something like that?
Yeah.
It
was
wasn't
way
there.
off it.
It was way off it. It was an ambitious lunge, and I think Lewis just knew that. Do you know what? I don't want to get any damage. I'll just avoid it.
Yeah, but obviously we know it's being investigated after the race. Now, this podcast is going to come out in about 24 and a half hours time from this very minute. Some news might have dropped. If we're not talking about it, it's because it is currently 4:27 p.m. on Sunday afternoon in the UK. We know it's being investigated after the race. That's all we know so far. I would be surprised if we didn't see Max Verstappen receive a penalty, personally. I think we'll see a 5-second penalty just because, look, everything you're saying is right. Max was quicker. Max was going to make the pass at some point. I get why he was trying to get through the pack as quick as possible because we saw how damaging it was to be stuck behind back markers or, cars on different strategies, or even just cars that were on the same strategy but slower cars. But that move wasn't on. And if Lewis had taken that corner like normal, there would have been a huge smash, and there'd be no one else to blame other than Max just dive bombing into that corner.
It would have made the race a bit more exciting.
Yeah, do you know what? We probably could have done with it.
Right, Kick Sauber. So Nico Hulkenberg qualified P19, Bortoleto a P7, another Q3 qualifying session for Bortoleto. Bortoleto then went to finish in P6, picking up 8 points today for Sauber. Hulkenberg P13. But what made me laugh is I don't know whether the FIA or the stewards got confused with the jump start, because they basically gave both drivers were under investigation for the jump start. Bortoletto's was absolutely fine, and Hulkenberg's, I mean, look, it was marginal. I see the car slightly jump, but even Hulkenberg was a bit like, really? I don't remember seeing that. But he got a 5-second penalty for that.
Yeah, but who was it? There's been some over the last couple of seasons which have been outrageous. And they've not done anything.
Lando's had one in the past. He's had one this year, actually.
Lando definitely had one.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, another solid weekend for Bortoleto. He is just growing with confidence. And we said at the beginning of the season, we were expecting big things from him, even being in a Sauber. And, he was, 7 seconds behind Fernando Alonso come the end of the race. He was 4 seconds ahead of Lance Stroll. This is a guy who, I mean, give him a competitive car next year, he could really do some good things.
Do you know what? I'm just going to put it out there. I did say Bortoletto would be one to watch this season at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And granted, started very slowly, but he was a rookie and pretty dreadful car. But he's really picking up that pace. And I mean, to finish P7 today, P6, sorry, yeah, is just quality. I mean, that would borderline be unthinkable for a Sauber fan at the start of the season. But
they're doing the right things. Sauber are doing the right things. They're getting the right people in, as we said before. Jonathan Wheatley, Bonotto, Hulkenberg. You know, a rookie in Bortoletto. They're going to obviously be Audi next year, but they're doing the right things. They're building a really good foundation there, and it's night and day compared to what they had last year with Bottas and Zhou, and you know, that monstrosity of having like 1 minute 30 pit stops. Do you know what I mean? Like they're a team who have got a really good foundation now, and they're really building for the future. So I'm seeing big things for that team.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken so highly of Hulkenberg this season. They've got such a good setup there, and you know, moving into the Audi era, I think that's going to be sick. And they've got the perfect combination between young and old. They've got Nico Hulkenberg is not old as such, but you know, he's that experienced F1 driver that has been around for a long time in the sport, who's still very quick, very underrated. And now they've got Bortoletto, who obviously won F2 last season, and he's very highly rated, and he's come into the sport this season, and he's been very, very consistent, and now he's getting quicker. So I think they'll be super happy with how this season is going.
Yeah, they'll be going into the summer break very delighted. He
obviously got driver of the day as well, which was well deserved.
Oh, 100%. It was a very, you know, we'll talk about driver of the day in a bit, but let's touch on to another team who, for me, massively outperformed this weekend. Aston Martin. Alonso qualified P5, Stroll P6. Fernando Alonso. Huh? I don't know where this has come from. It's mad. It is absolutely mental. And I don't know if it's the fact that, you know, we gave Lance Stroll a bit of stick last week going, is there enough passion? He goes and puts it on P7 today. Yeah. Alonso P5. Yeah, we'll take the credit for it.
Yeah, maybe he saw one of our clips and he was just like, you know, that's pissed me off. Now I'm motivated. So you're welcome. That's on us. But I think Aston Martin are they starting to become quite a confusing team? Because how have they pulled this out of the bag? I don't understand. Like, Fernando Alonso yesterday was in quali was so quick. I just, and obviously that by the time you got to Q3, their quali laps I think were only like 100th apart from one another, him and Stroll, which is really bizarre.
Alonso was a 1:15.2 and Stroll was a 1:15.6, but you know that I
swear it was closer.
The drive between both of them. I know. Actually, do you know what? I completely have lied to you then, because
it was a four.
It was a 1:15.481 for Fernando Alonso and a 1:15.498 for Stroll. So yeah, sorry, I looked at the
almost 200ths.
Yeah,
that is, you know, that's pretty nuts, and they were comfortable there. You know, if I know everyone's time slowed down in Q3, but if Fernando Alonso's Q2 time was enough for P2 in Q3. So but I know the McLarens were super quick in Q2, but it's just crazy. You don't expect that from Aston Martin. God, on the odd weekend you might expect Alonso to scrape like a P8 or something.
Yeah. I think it's very track. I think it's very track specific, though, isn't it, with regards to Aston Martin? And you've seen that throughout this year. That some tracks they seem to work really well out. Some tracks they just are non-existent. You saw that in Spa, I think it was. They really struggled there. But Fernando Alonso showed once again today his He was backing that pack up, wasn't he, from like what, P6, 7, 8, and all of a sudden he was like, all right, now I'll start driving. And I mean, he
Yeah.
did wonders on those mediums. And there's something I want to touch on with regards to Pirelli tyres, and I think this is where, we talk about having boring races. Today wasn't the most boring one because we had a good battle between Lando and Oscar, Leclerc, Oscar, and all of that. But I think what's really showing is these Pirelli tyres are really ruining racing, because no way should Lando Norris have finished that race and still had better pace, really, than Oscar Piastri come the end of that race. And you saw that with obviously Charles Leclerc and that. And we've seen it so many times throughout this season that actually these drivers can just go on. Okay, you talk about Spa last year, 2024, right? George Russell, no way should have won that. He was on those hard tyres for ages. Just a one stop, finished the race on those tyres. They've made these tyres so durable that actually people can just do these one stops. And for me, I feel it just kind of is ruining the racing.
Just choked on my spit there. Yeah, I would agree. They're super durable. Like, I'm not saying what they've done is like probably an engineering feat, like unbelievable. They've got cars that are driving around tracks at like, what was the average speed round here? It was, for George Russell, his average speed was 192.2. I'm going to say kilometers per hour, but maybe even miles per hour, but irrespective. And you've got tyres that are able to fly around there at that pace for like 30, 40 laps. It's incredible. It's unbelievable, but you're right. It shouldn't happen. The tyres should not be easy to drive on. That's not how it should be. We do need to make them basically a little shitter. We need to have them degrade quicker, because, yeah, like you say, at the end of the race, I know it's a difficult track to overtake on, but there was a massive tyre offset between Lando and Oscar in the same car, and Oscar couldn't get past him. It's just
fair play to Lando. I'm taking nothing away from Lando. Lando did phenomenal laps to keep that gap and hold it and go on and win and do that on a one stop. But there was no reason, Oscar Piastri could have done that himself. Do you know what I mean? The reason why he didn't do that, and the reason why Charles did a two stop, is because they thought that was going to be other cars were going to, degrade throughout that later on in the lap. It didn't work like that. And I think just for fans, it's really difficult, because you start the race off by going, okay, well, these are the potential two stops. It looks like it's going to be a two stop. All the engineers are going, it's going to be a two stop. But then, I mean, what Fernando Alonso on those mediums did 38 laps or something.
It got crazy.
That's just ridiculous. Like, for me, it just ruins the racing. And this whole thing of taking care of your tyres and all of this stuff, and people do that, and brilliant. But there's no way, when tyres are expected to go off about lap 16, where the first pit stop is meant to happen, and they're still doing like double that, it shouldn't happen. It just ruins the racing, and it would have made it more exciting by, the two stops, the undercuts, the overcuts, all of this type of stuff. But we just didn't have that today. Do let us know what your thoughts are on that.
That is like, that's part of it, where F1 has become so about like tyre management and all of that bollocks, where like we're not able to just watch the cars go as quick as they possibly can for.
No. And I know you can argue about it's just been, that's strategy, that's, good driving because they're protecting the tyres, that's the tyre management, all of that stuff. Completely agree. Completely understand where you're coming from. But actually, you do want to see drivers go for it and put 100% in and, get the most out of their tyres. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. It is a tough one. But do let us know what your thoughts are. Right, Mercedes. Antonelli qualified P15. George Russell qualified P4. In the race, Antonelli picking up a point in P10. George Russell there again, picking up a P3, another podium for Mercedes. Very, very good weekend for George. And I think for Mercedes, they'll be relatively happy with that. For Antonelli, and I would say another disappointing weekend from him.
Yeah, extremely disappointing. He's not going to be happy with that. Kimi Antonelli is better than P15. It's as simple as that. And look, Kimi is a very young man. He's 18 years old. He's come in to fill the shoes of Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, 6-time champion at Mercedes. It's never going to be easy. And, I think Kimi actually, for the best part of the season, has been decent. I think that's as far as I would say. If I'm cutting him slack on the basis that he's not just an F1 driver, he's an 18-year-old F1 driver, he's been good. He has been good. But, we said before, this is elite level sport. It doesn't matter. If you're being brought into that seat, it doesn't matter if you're 18, 45, 72. If you're being brought in, you're being brought in for a reason, right? And you have to live up to the standard. And this weekend was not up to standard again. He did obviously manage to make up 5 places in the race, got a point. So I think that will relieve him a little bit to be like, well, at least I climbed up through the grid a little bit. But yeah, he'll be disappointed, and I think he'll go away this summer and reflect on how this season is going. And I think Kimi Antonelli would be a crazy man to sit and look back at this season and how it's unfolded so far and say, I've done a bad job, because he's not done a bad job. He's not hit the heights that people were perhaps expecting of him. But I also think that's unfair, because he didn't build up that expectation of himself. Toto Wolff did. Mercedes built up this expectation. The fans were guilty of it as well. When he has come in and just, he's just getting on with it. And, I don't think he would get away with this season next season.
No, but like you say, for Antonelli, when you look at, for example, Bortoleto, no one really had high expectations for him coming into Sauber, because Sauber were pretty poor last year. Ollie Behrman coming into Haas, no one really had that high expectations for him. Antonelli, 18, at the time 17, turned 18, coming into a Mercedes team where there is so much expectations. When you've got a team principal like Toto Wolff, who is putting you on this pedestal, going, yeah, this is a driver we want to invest in. This is what he's going to go on and do. He's our next, chapter for Mercedes. You are going to have that pressure, and he is a very sensitive kid, and that's absolutely fine. But he will take it personally. And if you've seen the Antonelli movie, if you haven't, go and check it out. It's a very good watch. But you see that in there, that he is a very sensitive man. He is someone who takes a lot of, it takes it personally, and he will take this, and it will be a big learning curve for him this year. Yeah,
it will be. I hope Kimi Antonelli knows that we'll always be rooting for him. I really hope he lives up to the expectation. And now, he will definitely be at Mercedes next season. Mercedes are not going to dismantle that lineup for anyone other than Max Verstappen. And I think that's fair. I don't think there's any reason to look to get rid of Kimi Antonelli. There's certainly no reason to look to get rid of George Russell. They've got a really good partnership, and if Kimi even turns out to be like 80% of what he's built up to be, then he'll turn out to be a phenomenal driver.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's talk of Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton, Q2 knockout, P12, and Charles Leclerc put it on pole. Lewis was obviously, rightly so, very disappointed after qualifying. Today, in the race, finishing P12 again, he lost 2 places on those hard tyres, and starting on the hards is always a difficult call, and I don't quite understand. There was only 2 drivers. I think it was him and Gasly who started on hards, and I feel like they missed the trick there with Lewis. You saw how quick Lewis was on the second stint with the mediums. I don't know. The strategy wise, he had nothing to really to lose, but a very disappointing day for Lewis Hamilton. But ultimately, Charles Leclerc is going to be very, very angry post-race. And you heard it on the radio. He was leading that race quite comfortably for a long period. To then finish P4, not even on the podium, he'll be very disappointed.
Yeah, well, I mean, I read apparently that Ferrari muted his mic after the race. You know, normally you can listen in to the radios on like F1 TV Pro and stuff. He apparently couldn't, like Charles's mic was cut. It's look, we touched on Ferrari, but this might sound stupid because I think if you said yesterday, you know, if we had this conversation yesterday, you'd be saying, well, it's a mixed weekend for Ferrari. I'm going to go out and say this is an awful weekend for Ferrari. And people might disagree with me because Charles Leclerc got P1. Yes, you know, he qualified P1. And that was sensational, by the way. What a lap. But Lewis Hamilton's weekend, disappointing overall. No, there's no positives to take from this weekend. We're going to have to take it on the chin and move on. Yeah. The way that Charles' weekend ended, Ferrari are walking away with a P4 and a P12 after all that excitement yesterday. And not just that, it was the fact that Charles was leading the race comfortably. You know, we said he was net P1 for essentially most of the race. And then he finishes behind George Russell. Now, it has come out after the race that apparently he had an issue with his chassis from lap 40. That's what I've read. I don't know what could have caused that, what the damage was. But this was allegedly costing him like 2 seconds a lap. Now, what Charles was really angry about, he obviously came out over the radio. And I'll recite his message here. This is so incredibly frustrating. We've lost all competitiveness. You just have to listen to me. I would have found a different way of managing those issues. Now it's just undrivable. Undrivable. It's a miracle if we finish on the podium. Well, no miracle presented itself and he did finish fourth. And it was just another, I hate to say it, I really do, because look, I'm wearing the shirt. Another Ferrari disaster class.
And he finished 20 seconds behind Russell. Okay, this is a guy who's leading the race for a long period of time. To finish 20 seconds, it's mad.
Obviously, I don't want... Look, if there's an issue with the chassis, there is an issue with the chassis. But that's... Hopefully, we don't know yet. That's no one's fault, right? Because how did he have the pace for 50 laps but then didn't for the last 20 or whatever? But there was still clearly issues going on within that team. And that's really what I'm pointing towards. Charles was deeply unhappy with something that was costing him. That was not related to the chassis, because Fred has also come out and confirmed that in like the post-race interviews. That, you know, he was talking about the chassis issue and they basically said, oh, is this what like Charles was so angry about? And he was like, no, that was something else, which did also cost him time. But it's just Ferrari through and through, isn't it? It's so frustrating. I just think they have to do something within the team. They really need a culture shift in that team to get them back to winning ways.
They just seem to be the clowns of F1. They just seem to be a team who show glimmers of class like they did yesterday, and then all of a sudden just you got and we've said this before, you got two experienced drivers with Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc. Granted, this weekend Lewis Hamilton's issues was his own fault, 100%, okay? But that's not always like that throughout the races. There's some times where Lewis is coming over going, what about this? Listen to me. I've got ideas. Listen to me. Charles Leclerc, you hear in his radio messages how frustrated he is because he's got these ideas. Trusting them to go out there and do the job. And the issue is, due to that frustration, you actually saw Charles Leclerc almost take out George Russell, and that could have cost him even more.
That was naughty.
There's
no defending Charles there. He was driving angry and he almost cost himself and George Russell the race.
Yeah, but the reason why he got to that point is because of the team. And that is what keeps happening. Charles Leclerc is losing his head in these races because he's getting so frustrated. And Ferrari have got to be very careful. They can't keep holding on to the fact that they're Ferrari all the time. Eventually, drivers will take it that actually this is not a good team to be at. And they've got to start turning it around. Fred Vasseur having a new contract. In all honesty, do I think that is a right choice at this moment in time? I don't think I've seen enough from Ferrari for them to go, do you know what, I want to invest in Fred because I think he's doing a good job. I personally don't. And I know you could say they're second in the constructors, all of this stuff, but it means nothing. All right, it means nothing.
It seems a little bit premature on the Fred thing. We always speak very highly of Fred and we like him, but until he's gonna go in there and be like, right, I'm ripping this up, we are starting fresh, they need someone who is going to go in there and perform surgery on that team from the inside all the way out. Now, you've made a big step in bringing Lewis Hamilton to the team. You have to follow that up by building it around that as well, because just one man is not going to make a difference. I hope the decision to extend Fred's contract is a good one. And
yeah. So interestingly, so I've got some post-race. So Lewis Hamilton has said that there's a lot going on in the background at Ferrari that's not great and has left him feeling like they should change drivers, but he still loves racing. It's a weird one. There is something going on here. And, he's even said it was pretty bad, not really felt like progress could be made, just stuck where I was. The mindset heading into the break, same as it was yesterday, glad it's over and looking forward to going away. I mean, something's going on here, and Lewis just isn't happy. I can't put my finger on it. Has he? I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Luke, because perhaps it's not the fairy tale we expected going to Ferrari.
No, but sometimes you got to kiss a few frogs before you find your prince. I think what I will say is Lewis can't be surprised. I don't think. How come we were all able to see from the outside that Ferrari were a bit of a shambles as a team? How critical was I, other than like this is not a word, but the iconicness of the move? How critical was I of this move to Ferrari last year when it came out? I hated the idea. I well and truly hated the idea of Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari.
Yeah.
Because there's something wrong with that team. Really wrong. Like deep within. And if I could see it, there's no way in hell that Lewis couldn't see it. All other fans see it. No one in the last 5 years has looked at Ferrari and thought they've got it good. What they're doing is good. So Lewis must have gone in there with this idea that I'm going to go in and we're going to do this. All this is going to change. We need to do this, do that. The only way in which I think he can end up feeling like this is that maybe the changes that he's wanted to make or maybe were promised to be made aren't being made, and he's not seeing that development. Because, like I say, it's no surprise. Are we truly surprised that Ferrari are where they are right now? No. Is anyone surprised that, yet again, Charles Leclerc was unable to convert that pole into a win? What is that, 27 poles? Yeah. I think Charles Leclerc has now. 8 race wins. And this is not all Ferrari's fault. Charles is guilty for a lot of them as well, but it's in Ferrari's DNA,
Okay. So interestingly, obviously Lewis Hamilton has come out and said that there's a lot of things which are just staying the same. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background which aren't great. And he was asked this on, his response on why. He said about maybe they should change to another driver. He said, not particularly. When you have a feeling, you have a feeling. There's a lot going on back in the background, so that's not great. My then thought process was actually Fred Vasseur came out and he was spoken to about Lewis Hamilton's comments, and he said Lewis is very demanding. He's very demanding with the team, with the car, with me, and I think it's also very demanding with himself. It's the approach from a 7-time world champion to be very demanding with everybody and with himself. And this gets me thinking, is he just too demanding for a team like Ferrari, and can Ferrari just not deal with it? Because we know we've seen Ferrari over the years. They're comical. They don't make the right decisions. They're poor decision making. They don't have the right processes in place. Is this just too much for Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton?
Yeah, because I'm not sure whether Ferrari have that winning culture anymore, and we know that Lewis does. We haven't seen it from Ferrari since the sort of noughties.
Because the thing is for me, that comment from Fred Vasseur highlights a lot there. You have, when he was with Toto Wolff was demanding. Lewis Hamilton was demanding. You had two powerhouses there pushing for success. You've now got a powerhouse in Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, because they're both very talented drivers. But perhaps you don't have the team behind them who are as passionate as the likes of Mercedes were in the past, or Red Bull in pushing that team forward for a championship, or even McLaren. That's the feeling I get from when I hear these comments from Fred Vasseur, Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, that Ferrari don't have, or they've lost that winning mentality within that team, and they're just mentally weak compared to maybe some other teams on the grid.
Yeah, I mean they definitely don't have that winning mentality. I'm not denying that they don't all want to win, but it never looks like they're really doing much about it. There's always something, and it's like I said, Fred Vasseur has got a big job on his hands, and if he wants to warrant that 2-year contract, he's going to need to start making some calls that are going to upset people. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Do let us know what your thoughts are on Ferrari. Obviously, it's a very turbulent place to be at this moment in time. Lewis Hamilton is not happy. Charles Leclerc is not happy. As you said, Fred Vasseur has got a big job on his hands. Does he deserve that extra 2-year contract? I personally don't think so. I don't think I've seen enough from him to warrant that contract extension. I think I needed to see a bit more to actually feel comfortable as a Ferrari fan, as a Lewis fan, that they're going in the right direction. At this moment in time, it is not looking that way. Let's finish on McLaren. Obviously, Lando Norris, look, a phenomenal drive for him to actually pick up that win. He never looked like he was in for the race win halfway through that race, but he did enough. He did what he needed to get it across the line. Oscar Piastri will be very, very disappointed with that, I think, especially with the team's decisions to pit him so early, trying to put him on a 2-stop and then all of a sudden say to Lando, oh, actually, yeah, we'll put you on the 1-stop. Was that the right call by McLaren? Obviously, it was for Lando Norris, but was that the right call for Oscar Piastri?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because I think with the power of hindsight, you would say, well, why are we bringing in people for 2 stops when it's hard to overtake and tyres aren't degrading? But we only really know that now come the end of the race. I think ultimately Oscar had the favourable... He had the favourable strategy. Because he was out front. Lando had a horrific start, can we just add. He did pull it back, and look, he then went on to win the race. He was very quick, and we've always said this about Lando. He is supremely fast, but it will be a frustrating one for Oscar. Oscar is not going to be happy with how this weekend ended, because it's tight. That championship is tight. And yeah, Oscar's just lost out on 7 points, which he's gone from having, I think at the end of this weekend, he would have been 23 points clear.
Yep.
Instead, he's now 9 points clear. So, he was almost a full race win ahead of Lando in points, and that's kind of just slipped away from him. So it's going to make it really interesting for coming back from the summer break, because they've set it up perfectly, and Lando deserved it. Look, he went on a different strategy. We always call McLaren out when we feel that they've done something that favours Lando, because let's be honest, we can sit here and say the team clearly favour Lando. This was nothing to do with that. He kind of had no other choice than to take the alternative strategy, which was the one stop in this case, because there was no other way he was going to get P1. Now he took it. It could have not worked out, but it did work out. And part of the reason that it worked out is because he was so fast. So all I say is fair play, Lando. That was, in my opinion, he deserved it.
Yeah. No, and look, very, very solid drive. It's obviously 9 points different now in the championship. The constructors is pretty much under wraps. But yeah, coming after the summer break, I think it's going to be very interesting between these two. At this moment in time, you know, we are at the summer break now, Luke. Who is your favourite still for the championship?
I think it's still Oscar Piastri. I think one thing we are seeing less of is there was some, that move from Oscar was a little bit desperate.
Yeah.
Into the second
the lock up into turn one.
Yeah. That was a bit desperate, and I think Oscar needs to ensure that he is keeping his calm head that has put him in this position. That's the main reason he's in this position, is because he's able to just drive level-headed. And that to me was not the signs of a level-headed driver.
Interesting. Do let us know. For me, yeah, I still think it's going to be Oscar, but Lando's doing a great job. He's keeping his championship alive. He's doing exactly what he needs to do, and I'm really excited for the second half of the season. I think we got a great battle between both McLaren drivers there.
Just before we wrap up, I have two. They're not really quizzes,
okay,
but they're like two little stats.
Okay,
kind of, yeah, they are stats. I'll give you the first one here, right? McLaren obviously got their fourth consecutive 1-2 this weekend, right? Do you know how many times, or what's the most amount of times a team has had consecutive 1-2s?
How many was it this weekend, you say?
McLaren have got, now this was their fourth consecutive 1-2.
Isn't it 6 or something?
It's 5.
5.
Which,
okay.
Number one, that surprised me. I don't know why, because if you think about it, that's incredibly difficult to do. You're requiring two drivers to be at the absolute top of their game for, more than 5 races. But do you know who the last team were to get 5?
Part of me wants to say Ferrari, like the Schumacher Barrichello era, but is it Mercedes? Lewis Bottas?
Mercedes actually did it 3 times.
Wow.
In the turbo hybrid era. They did it in 2014, Malaysia to Monaco, where they had 5, so that would have been Nico and Lewis. You then had 2015 USA to Australia 2016, Nico and Lewis. But then Australia 2019 to Spain 2019, where you had Lewis and Bottas. So, and that was actually the last time, you had, the most recent 4 consecutive 1-2s was Lewis and Nico in 2016 from USA to Abu Dhabi. So, it's quite a feat, and I think McLaren could beat this record,
They've got they've got 2 talented drivers. Lando Norris is driving. I'd say this is the best we've seen from Lando Norris in a long time with his driving and his cooler head. He looks more confident, which is good to see, especially after what we've seen over the last few years. Oscar Piastri is just Oscar Piastri. He's doing his job week in, week out. He's very consistent and a very good performance. So yeah, I would not put it past them to smash that record, in all honesty.
And then I'll give you the final one, and we'll wrap up the show.
Yeah.
Max Verstappen has just gone 4 races in a row without a podium. When was the last time that happened?
2019?
2018. It was 7 years, 3 months and 26 days. That is impressive, because Max has not had the best of cars for the entirety of that time. And it goes to show how difficult this situation that Red Bull are in is.
It's bad, yeah. No, I agree. Funny enough, I was about to do the constructors with you, but actually when I've gone onto the F1 website, apparently they're all on 0 points. So that's really good. So it's neutralised now. So the second half of the season, they'll start on 0 points.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah. Let's start fresh. That will probably make it exciting, won't it?
Exactly. So yeah, for us, I think we both agree driver of the day, Bortoleto.
Yeah, deserves it. You know, what I will say is also Lando. Lando did drive great. I think there was a lot of good drives today, but yeah, Bortoleto getting P6, you know, no right to have that car there.
Yeah, I agree. But honourable mentions for me, yeah, do go to Lando. So a fantastic win. You know, Alonso P5, even Lance Stroll, again picking up some good points. Liam Lawson, but yeah, Bortoleto, phenomenal job. But that is the end of the podcast. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Do let us know if you're watching on YouTube. Do drop a comment. Do let us know what your thoughts are on the race. If you're listening to us on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating, and we'll be back next week. We've got some exciting stuff happening throughout the summer break. So do stay tuned for that. And yeah, have a good week, and we shall speak to you soon. Bye bye.